like to say that I was a born rebel. I'm a firstborn, and I feel like I've never really liked following the rules. I've always been the kid to like question, but why? But why? So I feel like a lot of that question of just, but why has led me to where I am today, being financially independent, being an entrepreneur, kind of going the road less traveled because I've just always been okay with not following the standard path, and much to my family's frustration sometimes, I'd be
Right.
doing things that they're just like, what are you doing? It's like I did all the traditional stuff. I went to college, I got my master's, I got my fancy corporate job, I checked off all the things on the quote unquote American dream checklist. And I just discovered as I continued to achieve those milestones, like it wasn't for me. I felt like I was living a lot of somebody else's projections of what success was, about what happiness was. And so the past, I'd say, 5 to 10 years has been dismantling everybody else's expectations of me and rebuilding myself into the version that now I can say, like, I'm actually living my best life.
Oh my gracious.
Even back in high school, Jennifer inspired more than
Cambié la imagen por vender bitcoins.
Come on, shake your body, baby, do that conga. Jannese Torres, welcome to Growing Up Latina.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Like, I've been wanting you on the show for such a long time. Everybody knows that money is my favorite topic to talk about.
Yes.
Not for the reasons why everyone thinks, but more so because I've just had a terrible relationship with money growing up. And so it's something that I don't shy away from. Anytime that I have an opportunity to discuss money, I'm like, let's do it. So I'm super happy to have you on the show. I want to start with, what do I have to understand about your earliest years to understand the woman that you are today?
I like to say that I was a born rebel. I'm a firstborn, and I feel like I've never really liked following the rules. I've always been the kid to like question, but why? But why? So I feel like a lot of that question of just, but why has led me to where I am today, being financially independent, being an entrepreneur, kind of going the road less traveled because I've just always been okay with not following the standard path, and much to my family's frustration sometimes, I'd be
Right.
doing things that they're just like, what are you doing? It's like I did all the traditional stuff. I went to college, I got my master's, I got my fancy corporate job, I checked off all the things on the quote unquote American dream checklist. And I just discovered as I continued to achieve those milestones, like it wasn't for me. I felt like I was living a lot of somebody else's projections of what success was, about what happiness was. And so the past, I'd say, 5 to 10 years has been dismantling everybody else's expectations of me and rebuilding myself into the version that now I can say, like, I'm actually living my best life.
I love this. I love this. I want to unpack this. Let's start with, I always say Sala vibes, because if you paint me what that Sala looked like, it tells me a lot about just how you were raised and the upbringing. So paint me that Sala vibe. Like, what novelas were you watching? What music were you listening to? Who was around? Do you have brothers and sisters? What food were you eating? Like, just paint me this picture.
Yeah, I love that question. So I'm full Puerto Rican. My parents are high school sweethearts. They met on the island, got married, came to the mainland. My father is a military veteran, and my mom is She has a career as an executive assistant. She's worked in, nonprofits and in education. And so I come from a very, humble household. They've been married 43 years. So I always had an example of like what it looks like to kind of stick through things. That whole saying, through better and worse and for richer for poor, I've seen it all. And, my mom talks a lot about how if she could go back and do things differently, she would have done what I've done, which is not focus on a lot of the things that women are told are like the most important things: get married, have the kids, check off all that stuff. She's like, I really wish I had focused on my career. And I heard that pretty early on. So I think I always had like this internal drive to not necessarily follow that list. And also, I never wanted to be financially dependent on a man because I saw a lot of that growing up in so much of my immediate household, but like extended family members. I definitely saw instances where women were trapped in relationships because of finances, and they were not good relationships. It's like one of these things where you saw them tolerating a lot of disrespect and abuse because there was not that financial autonomy. My mom did not speak English when I was born, and so she learned English watching Sesame Street right alongside with me. I have always been a natural, curious learner. I've always been a good student. I think a lot of that has to do with my dad. My dad is an engineer. He is self-taught, didn't go to college. He went to the military and learned as much as he could about electronics and computers before it was a fancy thing, and he ended up being able to build a very successful career out of it. And so from him I definitely get my curiosity, and from mom I definitely get the passion, the love, the focus on the family. It was a great upbringing, honestly. But when it comes to money, I definitely felt the stress of there never being enough. I felt the dynamic of what it looks like as a woman to be financially dependent on a man, because my dad has always been the breadwinner, and the unique thing about his career is that it required him to travel a lot. So my mom was like a married single mom, essentially. She
Mm.
was like raising us by herself, me and my younger sister, 5 out of the 7 days of the week. And so I saw kind of this idea that like maybe in order to have a family you need to sacrifice if you want to make money, because that's what I saw my dad doing. I saw him sacrificing time in order to be a provider, and I saw my mom sacrificing her career aspirations to be a mom.
Mm. This is interesting, and the reason why I say this is interesting is because we oftentimes we do mirror what's happening in the households, right? So like for me growing up, we went through a lot of financial struggles, but I never actually heard about it.
Mm,
So if my mom was going through something, she would kind of like brush everything under the rug, and there would be times where my mom was not eating, but she made sure we had food on the table. And
yeah.
I knew for a fact that she was struggling. Like I just knew it because
Yeah,
but
of course.
it's not a conversation that she has. She never made me feel bad about it or anything like that. It was just something like kind of like the unspoken truth, right? Like we all
Hmm.
knew. And so for you, where you're at is like you're kind of seeing like your mom is sacrificing, your dad is sacrificing. So now naturally, your entire household is like a big pool of just everybody's making some sacrifice now.
Yeah, and
And yet you're like this, because you do have this confidence in you, but then, and you have the curiosity, but the idea of, I want to take that risk, where does that come from?
I think that has come from honestly like being able to separate myself physically and also like emotionally from my family's dynamic. I think it's very easy to be influenced by our families when they're like all around us all the time. And I started really getting serious about taking risks in my early 30s. And part of that was making the decision to move out of state, which is like very taboo for Latino household, for the daughter to like pick up her shit and go. Like we're moving 1,000 miles away. My mother was so upset. She like did not speak to me for weeks when I told her I was leaving, even though the whole reason behind it was because at that point I had learned about the financial independence movement. And one of the things that I talk about is reducing your cost of living. The more money that you have to save and invest, the better. And so I knew that I could create opportunities to lower my cost of living by moving to a lower cost of living state. So from Jersey, I moved to Florida. I was able to transfer with my job, so I kept my salary. that automatically, just making that move boosted my income by like 25% because I was no longer paying income tax, and
Right.
my dollar just went further. And so I had been thinking about like what are some kind of bigger things that I can do to really jumpstart my journey to getting my financial ish together. That required me to make the sacrifice of leaving my family because just made sense for me and what I wanted out of my life. And so I think as I've kind of progressed in that journey of taking those risks, I've gotten a lot more confident in like, not everybody's going to get it, but it's not also theirs to get. And I think once you start practicing that or exercising that muscle of risk taking, and you realize you didn't die, it makes you take on additional risks, obviously calculated. You don't want to just be, like I say, jumping out of the plane with the parachute, but wealth requires an inherent risk, wealth building. When we think about how the rich get rich, it's building businesses that might fail, it's buying investments that might tank, it's taking chances on buying real estate that maybe nobody else sees the vision of, like, why are you buying in the hood? But then, maybe 10 years later, that hood is gentrified and your property's worth 10 times, but you're the one that took the risk. So I think once I started getting around these conversations about like, what does wealth actually require? The point of it is you got to take risks because, saving your money under a mattress is something we see all the time, but that's not how you get rich.
That is very true. I want to get into risk taking, but before I go into that, I want to talk about the education of money because money is very much a language. And so at some point, either you were self taught or somebody taught you, but someone, nonetheless, you were introduced to the ideology of money in some sort of way. What was that moment for you? Your first introduction to money?
So, obviously you get the basic lessons typically from your family, like, you should have some savings, like don't spend everything that you make. Credit cards are bad. Like those, that's the messaging that I got. You need a checking and a savings, pay your bills on time. So I had like very fundamental knowledge passed on to me from my family, but it was like very basic. And it wasn't, again, wealth building advice. It was just like, this is how you just pay the bills, and make things work type of thing. I started really getting serious about money when I found myself completely dissatisfied with my career as an engineer. I followed in my dad's footsteps. I went to college, I got a biology degree, and then I ended up getting a master's degree, and I ended up working in pharmaceuticals and the medical device industry, which very well paying careers, but a lot of work, soul sucking, salaries instead of, hourly pay. So it doesn't matter if you're working 40 hours a week or 80 hours a week, you still getting the same paycheck. And it was just like this, as I was approaching my 30s, I'm just like, is this what all of this was for? Just to be clocking in for the next 45 years of my life? I just could not see 65-year-old Jannese like still doing this. And so I went on Google and I typed in a search query that changed my life forever, which was, how do you quit your job? And I recommend that everybody listening to this episode literally go into Google and type that in, because it's going to introduce you to the financial independence retire early movement, or the FIRE movement. And I found blogs where people were talking about, I'm saving and investing 50% of my income, 60% of my income. I'm making drastic cuts to what I spend money on, and I'm shoving this money in the stock market. I'm buying real estate. I'm starting businesses, and I'm using this money to buy my freedom, to get out of the corporate rat race, to give myself the ability to live a quote unquote retired life in my 30s, in my 40s, way before what we're told is like even possible. And that led me down this rabbit hole of just wanting to understand, like, damn, it's not just all about like getting a paycheck and paying your bills. Like, you can actually use money to buy back your time, which is not a concept that I had ever been introduced to. And from there, I started listening to podcasts. I became obsessed. I am totally self taught. I never worked in the financial industry other than I was a bank teller in college. And it was just, there was not enough time in the world for me to absorb all this information. I was listening to podcasts on my commutes to work and back home. I was reading books and applying the stuff that I was learning. So, I figured out, like, what do I need to do to get in a position where I can actually make that decision to quit my job and be work optional. And that looked like taking an assessment of all of my debts. Who did I owe money to? How much? How much am I making? What am I spending money on? Like these are things that unless you actually take the time to look at a budget, to look at your bills, a lot of us are operating in autopilot. And so when I stopped doing that, I realized I actually have the power right now to completely transform my life, but it's going to require me to make intentional decisions, some that are more difficult than others. And that's kind of what started it all.
I want to give the audience like a real life example just so that they can start applying as well. Being that we're both Latina, I too, I'm Puerto Rican, born in Puerto Rico, Puerto Rican and Dominican. So some of the things that I've learned about money was similar to you in the sense of like, let's save. As I got older, now learning the language, not really understanding, because learning and understanding are two different things. I just
Facts.
learned, I was introduced to it. And so one of the things that I have done was get a budget app. And the budget app was something that was like the first step for me.
Yeah.
But it was actually kind of funny because I remember being, with my cousin and her fiance. Her fiance's like, I'm going to purchase this app for a whole year for you. But the app, you have to link your bank account to the app.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was in negative. So I did not want him to see that I was in negative. So I'm like, no, 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 don't worry about it. I can just do that when I get home. And he's like, no, let's just do it. He's like, no, no, no. Like we have to start talking about it. I don't care if you have $1. I don't care if you have $0. We have to start talking about money.
Yeah.
So what I want to know in real life situations is how can the audience, for people that are wanting to have this very much taboo conversation, how do we introduce this into our households, this conversation about money?
Yeah. Obviously it's much easier to change your financial situation when you don't have anybody else that's involved, right? But if you're in a relationship or you have a family, you need to involve them, right? And I think one of the most important topics that I talk about in my book, Financially Lit, is the fact that it's never too early to start introducing the concept of finances to your children or your partner, to be talking about money. Like you should be talking about this before you move in, before you start talking about marriage, before you start talking about how many kids you want, what's your credit score, how much debt do you have? What do
Real
you value?
conversations.
What do you value when it comes to money? Like how do you like to spend money? Do you like it on things, on experiences? What did you see growing up with money? All of these conversations are very fundamental to understanding a person's money psychology because we all have our shit, right? We all have our money trauma. We all have the baggage that comes from childhood and the things that we saw and the things that we experienced. And if you don't know that about the person that you're with, you might just like take what they do for face value versus trying to understand like why are you actually like this. Those are good questions to be able to answer.
Right.
Like a good example for me was my partner and I, when we started dating, we started talking about like just our financial upbringings, and he mentioned to me that he has never had a credit card. And I was like, sir, you're like 30 something years old. What you mean you ain't never had a credit card? Why? And he's like, well, my dad was a Dave Ramsey loyalist. And Dave Ramsey is very much about do not get into debt. Credit cards will ruin your life. And so if you need to buy anything, you pay cash. And so he's like, my whole life, I've just bought cars cash. I buy a used car here. I save up for the things that I want. And then I started explaining to him because I'm a credit card lover. Like I pay all of my bills with credit cards. I love travel hacking and rewards. And that's something my dad introduced to me once he became a consultant and started doing a lot of business travel. We as a family would go on like free trips with credit card points. So that's something that I knew. So when I explained that to him, he's like, oh, like I didn't know there was actually positive things about credit cards. But if we'd never had that conversation, he would not have a great credit score like he has now because I convinced him to use credit responsibly. But also B, it's like if we were to go and like make large purchases and then I find out all of a sudden you have a 500 credit score because you've just never had a credit, like that's when things can come to a head. So a lot of what is important, I think, in bringing the discussion to the people that you love is like the transparency is a must. You need to know what's going on and you need to involve people so that they have a vested interest in like why we're doing these things. If you're saving for a house, you need to tell your kids, like, hey, maybe we're not going to splurge this Christmas because my gift to you next year is going to be a brand new bedroom so that you don't have to share with your brother who is a freaking slob, So you just got to have them Be invested in like why we're doing this as a family.
So I want to get into Dave Ramsey. So funny that you would even mention that because I actually do follow the Dave Ramsey entire method. It's something that, yes, growing up, everyone said, credit is power, credit is power, credit is power. And then you start getting more opinions from people, right? You
Right.
start getting a bunch of different opinions. And, my cousin was actually the person that was like, hey, I'm on this financial journey where I'm trying to clear off my debt and have no credit cards. The goal that I'm on is to be able to pay for everything in cash. Like if I can't pay for it in cash, then clearly I cannot afford it. So what is your response to something like that? Because you convinced your husband the opposite direction where credit is power. So what would your advice be on someone who is following this method, and what would you say in terms of not bashing Dave Ramsey, but like just like what what do you see in both
Yeah.
that are pros and cons?
Obviously when you save for cat or to buy things in cash, you have to be very intentional. You know that you can only afford what you have. And so I think if you're the type of person that is an impulse spender or you have just found yourself kind of in a cycle of getting in and out of debt, I think that approach makes sense just to teach yourself the financial discipline of like, don't spend more than you have. And, there was a point in my debt freedom journey where I said, yeah, I'm not going to use credit cards. I'm going to focus on paying off my debt. I'm not going to open any new credit cards. I'm not going to buy anything on these cards, and I want to get them all to a zero balance. And that's fine if you know that about yourself. Like if that's what you need to stay on a good financial path, then cool. On the flip side, life is expensive, y'all. And while you can save for the vacation and pay for that cash, or maybe you're lucky enough to like maybe have a job that gives you a nice bonus and you can buy like a new car cash, whatever. That's great. But most of us are not going to have four, five, six, $700,000 to buy a house in cash. And so when you're thinking about like larger purchases, credit is going to be a necessity for most of us, unless we just have an unlimited pool of money, which, as a first gen Latina, I definitely can't call my parents and be like, hey, mom, I want to buy a beachfront apartment. Let me get, $1.5 million loan. That's not going to happen. Okay.
Nope. Nope.
So, what I think needs to, for folks who, they want to prioritize debt freedom, but they also understand the importance of credit, I think you just have to use it within your level of discipline. If you know that if you rack up $10,000 of credit card debt, you're going to be stressed out and you don't know how you're going to pay this off, then maybe that's not why you use credit cards. Maybe you put your $50 a month cell phone plan on there and just have that as a recurring purchase that keeps your credit lines open, that keeps your credit history growing, and that shows that you are a responsible user of credit. Because it's not about how much you spend, it's really about how you utilize it. Do you pay your bills on time? Do you max out your cards or do you leave most of it unused? Do you have a long credit history that shows that you don't default on payments and that you're a reliable user? There are definitely benefits to using credit, but it has to be used responsibly. Otherwise, it will ruin your life. And I've experienced that personally. My parents were so afraid of credit for such a long time because they ended up having to file for bankruptcy because they just got in over their heads. And so
Yeah.
you got, and you have to
Mhm.
just kind of dip your toe in. Maybe you put one recurring charge. And then maybe another strategy too is just you save it for the thing you want to buy, you pay the credit card so you can get points, and then you automatically pay it off with the cash that you've saved up. So you're still using your credit, but you're also not letting the debt linger.
Correct. Correct. I want to get into mindset. Mindset is a huge part of why everything and anything in your life happens, specifically your mindset around money. With our upbringing and just what we were taught, what certain things did you have to leave behind culturally that got you to where you are today?
Yeah, I think fear. Fear is definitely the number one driving force with a lot of us. And that's one of the things that I talk about in my book is just how much it doesn't matter what you tell somebody to do with their money if they don't work on the mindset. As a financial coach, I've seen time and time again clients who they want to accomplish these things, they want to pay off their debt, they want to get a better job, they want to start investing, they want to buy their first piece of real estate, but there's this gripping fear of what if I make a mistake? Or what if I lose my money? And a lot of that comes from financial trauma that we experience as children, seeing your family struggle financially, seeing poverty, experiencing poverty. For those of us who were born before the Great Recession, I know people who watch their families lose their homes because of that. And so there's this trauma that is internalized and makes you very afraid to make decisions that could be perceived as risky. But, those are things that can be changed. It's just going to require first a level of awareness about kind of doing that soul searching, that digging of, well, why do I feel this way about money? And so one of the things I do in the book is I have a bunch of prompts for you to discover that money story, to start asking yourself questions like, what did you learn about money? Who was your biggest circle of influence? What did you experience? We need to ask ourselves these questions, because then when you know why, you can then start working to heal those relationships, right? Like, let's say your parents were involved in a situation where they were scammed by a financial advisor and they invested money and they lost it all. They're going to project that on you. And so when you mention the word, I'm going to start investing, they're going to be like, no, don't do that. That's throwing your money away, you know? But you have to educate yourself on, how do you find responsible financial advisors? How can you just invest on your own behalf so that you don't have to rely on somebody else? Where's a good place to get information? All of that stuff, you can become your advocate, but you have to understand that, like, money is always going to be an intimidating thing until you educate yourself. And then you just realize what rich people have realized, which is it's a tool and it's unlimited and you can make more of it, but it's not going to happen if you're afraid of everything.
Can you share a pivotal moment in your life where you realized that building wealth as a Latina was not only possible, but essential for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've had a lot of instances where I'm just like, damn, I'm glad I took this path, because I'd be in a much different situation. And I think for me, one of the more recent times was when I ended up getting a divorce a couple of years ago. And at that point, I was fully self employed. I was, running a multiple six-figure business. I had investments. I had just all from all external vantage points, I had my financial shit together. And I was able to walk away from that divorce without having to think about money. It was
Mm.
actually like, oh, I actually get to just get out of this because it's terrible and not because I'm stuck here. I didn't have to worry about how I was going to pay my bills or how I was going to provide myself with health insurance or any of that. I actually got to just focus on going to therapy, connecting with my support network, taking care of myself mentally, physically, emotionally. And that was a moment where I was just like, this is why. This is why every woman needs to be in this position, because we do deserve that level of freedom to opt out of environments that are not conducive to our well-being. And so that's a topic that I'm really passionate about, because I think it's a matter of survival, honestly, for most women to be financially independent, whether or not you're in a relationship, because things might start off great, but you can never have a guarantee that things are not going to go left. And the last thing that I want is for anybody to feel like they're stuck because of money. Money should never be the reason.
Very true. And you hear that all the time, sometimes within the culture. There are women that stay in relationships because they live a lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
So if they were to get out of this relationship, their entire lifestyle will completely shift and be downgraded.
Yeah.
And so again, to your point, that fear is really what's holding us back. What I want to know is, what are some of the biggest sacrifices that you have had to make personally on this journey of building financial freedom?
I think it's been on a personal front. Like, I'm just now at the age of 39 starting a family, but also
I know.
I'm like, I wouldn't have wanted it to be any earlier. Like, I think about when my mom had me at 24. And I'm like, girl, I was out in these streets at 24, like not even able to take care of myself. I was still living with my parents at 24. So I just think about like how taking that time to build my career, to get my financial ducks in order, like now approaching my 40s, I'm like, I actually get to be a fully present mom in a way that my mom could not be, because she's worried about paying the bills, you know? And it's just like this level of freedom. It required me to kind of, again, not follow the traditional path of like, get married in your 20s, have three kids by the time you're like 30. You know, I was okay with waiting until if the timeline made sense for me. I knew that I could provide a different life for my child than I had experienced. And so I think, it might be seen to some as a sacrifice to wait longer to have children. But for me, I'm just like, no, I think the best gift you can give your child is knowing that they're never going to have to worry about taking care of you. Because that's something that a lot of us are facing, are wrestling right now. Like I, as the oldest daughter, I know I'm going to have to provide some financial support to my family. So knowing that I'm not going to pass down that quote unquote trauma, that pressure to the next generation, I think it's worth the sacrifice.
Very true. I think it's also like, again, it's back to the mindset, right? Like,
Yeah.
there are some women that say, well, if I have a baby too early, I would have to stop my career. The idea that they would have to give everything up
Yeah.
to raise this child to then hopefully get back to their career and get that mojo going back.
Yeah.
So I think that's another fear-based topic where it's like, and we actually even saw that with Cardi B, right? Like
Mm,
when she got pregnant the first time, like everyone was like, no, 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 your career is popping off. Why would you do this now? This is a terrible decision. And she's like, no, I'm going to do this anyway. And you sound to me like you have that same kind of like, just idea in your mind, like, I'm going to do what's best for me. I don't care
absolutely.
what anyone has to say.
It's your timeline, it's your life, and you need to know when it's the right time. And you can argue that there's never a right time, but if you saw your parents struggle because they were teen parents, or they did not have the level of education that you have, or the level of ability to earn income, career opportunities, if you already have those things on your side, you're already going to get ahead. So it's just a matter of, trying to balance like what the expectations are from a professional perspective and also your personal life, and be okay with not following society's timeline, because at the end of the day, that's all made up. You have the
Yeah.
right to question that.
I want to talk about different stages in making money, right? Because the mindset that you would have to make five figures is not the same as you would have to make six figures and seven figures and so on and so forth. So, what are some, during the stages that you're going through, what are the different mindsets that you had to adapt, or like just something that shift where it's like, okay, what got me here is not going to get me there?
Yeah, I think a lot of us start off with the idea of what we see, where it's just like it's you exchange time for money, right? That's what most of us see. You walk into work, you get paid a certain amount of dollars per hour, and you leave, and that's your paycheck. And so, in the initial part of my career, I was just focusing on getting that number per hour, like as high as possible, through education, through job hopping, through experience. And then I realized at some point, like there is a cap here. Nobody's going to pay me $1 million a year just because I have an impressive resume. There's no job out here that's going to give me that unless I end up becoming a CEO for a company. And that's a career that takes a lifetime, arguably, to achieve. So I started discovering kind of the alternate universe that is entrepreneurship a little over 11 years ago, and specifically using the power of the internet. The internet has been really transformative for just opening up opportunities for us to start businesses without having a brick and mortar, without having like those traditional financial obstacles that can be the reason why people don't start businesses. Obviously, a lot of people think like, oh, you got to have, $100,000 credit line, or you have to have a bunch of money to start a business. Now, with the power of the internet, all you need is three things. You need a skill that you can sell, you need a way to get paid, and you need a way to market. And with social media, marketing is free. A skill you've picked up along the way, it's in your brain. You just have to figure out a way to package it. And, we got Stripe, we got Square, we got Zelle, we got Cash App, we got a million ways to get paid. So now, you know, once I started side hustling as a content creator and realized like, oh, I actually don't need to just rely on my job to make money. I can actually turn my skill set. I can print money with my brain, essentially. That was a revolutionary concept for me because I'd never experienced the power of taking something up here, putting it out into the world, and somebody exchanging money for it. And so now that I'm, fully self-employed, it's completely shifted the way that I interpret my efforts, the value of my skills, how I charge, because again, when you come from a world where it's just dollars per hour, you don't think the same way as an entrepreneur where it's like, you're not just paying me for the time, you're paying me for my experience, for my education, for the amount of work that I've done to be able to get to a level of professionalism that I have today. And so when you factor all of that in, you realize most of us are actually being underpaid for what we do, especially in a corporate environment, because you paid a lot of money for them degrees and you have spent a lot of time collecting skills along the way in your job. And sometimes, it doesn't translate into what we're actually taking home.
I agree. I also feel like when starting a business, because it varies, right, from person to person, I always found myself living in between my dream and my reality, where
Mm,
I was on radio at the time. I had this really nice radio career, but radio is a very slow hustle for people that don't know. It's probably one of the slowest hustles that you will see right now in the entertainment industry. But then I also had like a 9 to 5 job, right? And so then the moment for me was like, at what point do I transition from my reality to living out my dreams? So
yeah.
what would you tell someone who's kind of in that space where maybe they have some savings, maybe not a lot, maybe like 3 months worth of savings, but they're very much living in between this dream and their reality, and they want to know, when is the right time for me to quit my job?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that most of us, especially if you're like a first gen kid who has no safety net, most of us cannot just afford to quit our jobs and go, on this entrepreneurial journey. We don't have the privilege. And so you're going to have to build that side hustle that has the potential to become your full-time hustle while you're working. And I don't think that's a bad thing, honestly. I always looked at my paycheck as my angel investor in my future. So it was going to pay for equipment that I needed or software that I needed or, a virtual assistant or something. I always looked at it just like, this is money that is going to funnel the next thing. And so, one of my benchmarks when I was thinking about how am I going to quit my job, I wanted to practice what it was like paying myself through my business before taking the leap. I'm the type of person, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I have a science background. So I need evidence, like this
Yes,
is just how I'm trained. I can't be
I
out
love
here
that.
going on hopes and dreams. Like we need data. And so, this is the importance of knowing your numbers in your business, having accounting software, understanding like what are you bringing home consistently on a monthly basis? Can you pay yourself? And so I started diverting all of my paycheck from my traditional job to savings, pretended like it didn't even exist. And I started issuing myself a paycheck through my business. And I did that for about 4 or 5 months to prove to my brain that, oh, we can actually do this. Like, I actually don't need this job anymore. My business has gotten to a point where it's earning consistent enough income that I've replaced my salary. That was the thing for me. I'm like, I don't want to lower my quality of life. I don't want to change my lifestyle. I want to be able to just transition like nothing happened, except now I don't have to ask for PTO. Love that for
All
me.
right.
And obviously I don't have health insurance, so I got to figure that out too. One thing that was really insightful in that whole journey was working with a financial professional. I hired a CFP to kind of look at my financials, look at how much do I have in savings, investments, what's my business doing. We talked about even things like estate planning, how I was going to protect the wealth that I'm building. What am I going to do for life insurance and health insurance and all of these things that I'm giving up as benefits at work? And once we had that plan together, I felt much more confident because I felt like I had the data to support that this decision made sense. And so I
Mhm.
think, if you are on the fence and you really want to understand, like, am I in a position? Can you replace your paycheck if that's what you're trying to do? And also, what is the plan for replacing those benefits that you're giving up? How are you going to give yourself time off in your business? How are you going to get health insurance? All of those things are questions that you need to ask yourself.
Great advice. Let's talk about Yo Quiero Dinero podcast, one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. I swear I'm an avid listener just
Thank you.
because you drop gems all the time. And I can appreciate anyone that's dropping gems on their podcast. For me, I always say I'm attracted to information and education. So the fact that you are constantly providing the resources and the education behind it is very special. I want to know what inspired you to start your podcast?
Yeah, so I started listening to podcasts in earnest in like 2016, and I learned a lot from women like Susie Orman and Jean Chatsky and, the traditional voices of money in media. But I kept running into an issue where I could not find women of color, especially Latinas, talking about this. And I'm like, but money impacts everybody. So, like, why are we not having these discussions? Why are all
Right.
the podcasts that I'm finding that are catered towards Latinas about pop culture, about health and wellness, about celebrity gossip? I'm like, why are we not talking about grown ass things like money as if it's not something that we also need to navigate? And so, after, 3 years or so of listening to podcasts and realizing there's a void here, I decided that I was going to try to fill the void. And the inspiration for the show actually came from that song with Cardi B and J Lo called Dinero. I was listening in the shower and I had like a shower universal download where it's like, this is the podcast, Yo Quiero Dinero. It was literally like that simple. And I ran out of the shower. I hopped on Google. I searched to see if like this actually existed. It did not. And I like got all the social media handles right away. I started Googling like, how do you start a podcast? And I took my iPhone and my AirPods and I started talking to the universe. And here we are 5 years later, 1.5 million downloads and counting, but
Yes,
still,
talk about it. Talk about it.
hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, the number one podcast for personal finance for Latinas. And I'm just like, this is what happens when you just open yourself up to the universe downloads.
Yes. I want to get into the business of podcasting, right? If I'm totally honest, I speak about it often on panels. My journey to how I got here was depleting my K, which I would not advise to people. I'm not a financial expert, so I'm not a role model in this area. It's just the risk that I decided to take. Once I had a certain amount of money saved up, I was like, oh, I ran through that. What else can I do? Where do I have this money stored? Hey, my 401k plan. I'm still young enough where if I want to make the money back, I can.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I took a loan against my 401k plan. I straight depleted it. And
Jeez.
then that money went out. Exactly. And then that money went out. But for someone who doesn't have the savings, is not willing to sacrifice their 401k plan, how do we start this podcast? Because you've been super successful in your podcast and you're kind of showing us like, hey, you don't need to do Oprah to like make, I mean, you just ran down your stats. And
Yeah,
I'm
honestly.
like, I'm inspired. I'm inspired. So let's talk about the person who is in their closet, in their room, shooting this podcast, doesn't have the right equipment, but is so desperately wanting to turn this into a business for them.
Yeah, when I started podcasting 5 years ago, could have never imagined that it would turn into a whole business. And I think it's just kind of a testament of, first of all, you have to be doing things for the right reasons. This is not a business that it's like a get rich quick scheme. This is like you have something to say that's important and you want to provide a source of knowledge to a community that has been ignored, and so that's always been my mission with the show. It's like one of those things where if it never made any money, I'd still be doing it just because it's so much fun and I've met the most
Yes.
incredible people and just had like the most incredible experiences because of it. But you do not need a bunch of money to start a podcast. Like I literally started with my iPhone, and the Anchor.fm app, which is now Spotify
Yes.
for podcasters, is a free app. And it didn't cost me anything. It cost me time to like come up with the scripts and what am I going to talk about and reaching out to people and inviting them on the show. But this is still a very low cost business for me. I have an editor who is overseas who like works on all the audio and video editing. My sister is my podcast manager, so I've been able to actually create a business now that like employs family. And
Yes.
it's I started in my closet. Like I didn't even have a proper laptop when I started my show. I didn't do video podcasting for maybe 2 years after starting the show. And so, one of the things that I do now, I'm a podcasting coach because that's one of the things that people have come to me about. So now I have a course and I give you all like the quick blueprint to getting there faster without having to like be on Google and YouTube University like I had to do. But I think also too, there's so many more tools now thanks to AI that help podcasters like really show up professionally with not a lot of investment. Even just an example right now, we're using Riverside to film this podcast, and Riverside's got like transcription built in and editing
Yes.
using the transcript and social media content creation, and you're paying like less than $30 a month for all of these services. So it's not about spending a bunch of money. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about your Hollywood production podcast. And the reason why I say that is because look at somebody like Joe Rogan. Joe
That's
Rogan's
right.
podcast is very basic. Okay. He does not have Hollywood productions going on, but the man has, I don't know how many freaking hundreds of millions of downloads. And, you know, there's an audience, I think, for everything, but people have to know you're in it for the right reasons. You're sharing information that you can't find anywhere else. You're consistent, because nobody likes a podcast that's like, shows up 1 week and then they're gone for 2 weeks and then they show up again and then 5 weeks later. You got to be in it for the long haul. But one thing that I found time and time again for folks who are successful in this business, it's about showing up for people who feel like nobody else is doing so for them.
I think that's important for everyone to just take note of. I want my audience, if you guys have not grabbed a pen and paper and just started jotting what she's saying down, because it's so important. I don't want it to go over anyone's head. This is extremely, extremely important advice. So many people want to get into this game, and I always say this is a long-term game. Consistency weighs out everything.
Yeah.
I'm a person who used to focus on quality and what the aesthetics look like. And now I have now shifted my focus into content and more of the quality in terms of the content that I'm spewing out to the audience. How are
Yeah.
they benefiting from this pod? So I think that's very important to note. I also want to get into newsletters, which you rave about, like newsletters, blogs, and things of that. Is that your favorite way to make money in 2024 going into 2025?
So I'm a blogger at heart. That was my first dabble into content creation and kind of what led me down the path of understanding all these different ways that you can use the internet to make money. I think blogging is more important than ever because we see how raggedy these social media platforms can be. I see so many creators who are building their entire foundations on social media platforms that can be demonetized, deactivated, hacked, shut down, reported for violations, all this stuff. And that is building a business on a house of cards. Podcasting, blogging, these are evergreen ways of showing up online so that you create content once and people can consume it for years to come. I feel like that's much more of an effective way to market your business than dancing on TikTok and doing Instagram reels. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that should not be your primary focus as a creator. You need to have a foundation. You need to have that central repository of all your content that somebody can come to. And that if you're a podcaster, that's your podcast. And if you're a blogger or a content creator, that's your blog. Those are the things that you own, that nobody can take away from you. And I think it's so important from a sustainability aspect of a business. You got to own your stuff. All this social media stuff, that's rented space that can be taken away from you at any time. Newsletters are the way that you can communicate to your audience if your Instagram or whatever is shut down. So it is important for you to get people out of that algorithm and into your ecosystem through blogs, through podcasts, through newsletters. It's a must.
By the way, if you guys don't follow Jannese on Threads, you guys must tap into her Threads, because when Instagram or Twitter gets shut down, Jannese is not frightened. She is not shook. She's like, I told you guys, I told you so. This is why you need to do it like this. So
That's
make
it.
sure you guys tap in. In terms of like podcasting and partnerships, right? If someone is starting a new podcast, when is the right moment to reach out for partnership? How are we scaling this? How much do we ask for? Like, break that break.
Yeah, coming from, experience as a blogger who's worked with partners and things like that, I took my experience with monetizing and applied it to the podcast when I started. And so I think one of the easiest ways for most new podcasters to monetize is not through brand partnerships, but through affiliate marketing partnerships. Just because the affiliate marketing approval process is much less stringent than is for a brand partner. So I started monetizing my podcast with affiliate partners like BetterHelp and other financial companies and things like that. And those are things that you can find on affiliate marketing networks. There's job boards essentially where you can go and look at brands and apply to become an affiliate. They give you a link and you get paid every time somebody purchases something. I think that's a great way to start. There's also opportunities for you to monetize from day one, depending on your podcasting host. So, like an example is Spreaker. Spreaker allows you to start monetizing your podcast on day one, and they'll insert ads on your podcast. You just have to let them know what categories you're okay with them advertising. And obviously, those numbers will go up as your listenership goes up, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Now for my podcast, I work with an ad agency. And so they're the ones that are pitching all of my stats and things to different brands and getting the sponsorships for my show. But there's also talent agents that you can work with. You can absolutely do it on your own. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And also the money, I think there's no way to like set rates, because I
Right.
make six figures in brand partnerships and I do not get 100,000 downloads a month. So
Right.
there's this perception that like you need to be having a way bigger audience than you have to actually make money. What you need to have is a very loyal, a very niched audience, and one that's very targeted to the companies that you want to work with. Like me being very specifically geared towards Latinas and the Latino community, when brands are coming to work with us, they know who's tuning in. And
Hmm.
so the clearer that a brand is on who you serve and how engaged your audience is, the more leverage that you have when it comes to those financial discussions.
I want to get into Boardroom and something that they dropped online, which was the top podcast that we are seeing right now. Obviously, some of you guys may know Alex Cooper just signed a $120 million deal, or 125 million at Sirius XM, before she signed a $60 million deal at Spotify, and now she has transitioned to Sirius XM. Obviously, Joe Rogan is on as well. We have Diary of CEO, Steven. Not one Latina. What's going on with us? What's happening?
Honestly, we just are late to the game. I think this is still there's still a lot of space in this industry. And I think there's a perception that it's oversaturated. It's definitely not. I promise y'all, like, there's only about like 1.5 million active podcasts. That's not a lot when you think about the fact that there's like 8 billion people on this planet. And
Right.
I think when you start doing the digging, right, when you really start looking at niche podcasts that are catered towards a specific identity or a specific cultural group, it's still very novel. Even something as simple as like finding Spanish language financial content podcasts is hard in 2024. And so I think at the end of the day, it's really just about not enough people in our communities understand the power of these platforms and understand like where they can fill a need, because they're just putting themselves in the same realm as these folks. I am not a Joe Rogan target audience member. I'm not going to listen to that shit. So it's like we need our
Yeah.
own stuff. And if we don't create it, there's just going to continue to be that vacuum where the same type of people just keep reaping the financial rewards because we think that there's not room for us. And I promise you that there is.
Yes, there is, and hopefully we can change all of that. Before I get into my rapid fire, I want to get into the ideology of bougie and the biggest misconception when someone calls you bougie, right? I hear this a lot in my life. If I take too many Ubers, my friends will say, "Hey, Ali, you're bougie," and I'm like, "No, I'm just trying to be safe." You know what I'm saying? So this wealth guilt, how are we navigating through this? How do we tell our family and friends, hey, shut up respectfully? Like, I have to do what's best for me. I'm not going to dumb down for my audience. You guys are on your own journey. I'm on mine. What do we do here?
I literally have an entire chapter of the book dedicated to this, and it's called When Jenny from the Block Becomes Jenny with the Bag.
Yes,
Okay.
I love that you always say that. Yes, explain that to us.
Yeah, because it's like one of these things where you don't actually understand that there are going to be the side comments. Like once you actually become successful, right? Because everybody's always telling you, like, go be successful, go get the degree, go make the money, all the things. But then you're just like, well, why am I getting side comments now? Why am I getting comments like, oh, must be nice, or you don't have real problems. So, like, why are you giving us advice? Or, you got white people problems now. And I'm just like, I don't think I was prepared for that. But also, I think it's a kind of a sad realization that you may outgrow your environment in some way, shape, or form. Like the people that you start with might not be the people that you finish with. And it has nothing to do with like their own character flaws. But when you are in a growth mindset, you're just naturally going to be turned off by people who are still living in the scarcity and the victim mindset. It's just not going to vibe with you.
Right.
It feels very low vibration. It's like, I can't really entertain this energy because it's just not who I am anymore. And that can be isolating, when you are the first like person of color on your block. Or like you're younger by 30 years than all your neighbors, and they're just like, how the hell these Latinos afford this house? It's all that weird shit. But I think what's been really important for me is to surround myself with other incredible, inspiring women of color who are also on this journey. And it makes me feel like I'm not a unicorn. It makes me feel like
Yes.
I'm not crazy for wanting more. And I think your family will eventually get it once they realize and get to experience what life is like on your side of the fence. Like one example that I had, I took my mom on a mother daughter trip a year after quitting my job. And it was like a celebration of hitting this milestone of being able to take 2 weeks off to go to Europe. We went to Paris and London. I didn't have to ask for PTO. I didn't have to worry about a budget. It was like, we're going to fly first class. We're going to stay in bougie Airbnbs. We're going to do all that. And by the end of that trip, she was just like, I get it. Like, I get why you did all of this. And I was here calling you crazy, but I think we're the crazy ones for just accepting the bullshit, the basic, the mediocrity, when there is so much more out here. And so that for me was like a culmination of all of the sacrifices have been worth it. All of the side eyes and the why are you doing this? And why can't you just settle? Why can't you just be happy? Because now I get to show my loved ones that there is another option and open their minds up to like how they can craft some version of that into their own lives.
And now you just released on the gram, literally like yesterday, the day before yesterday, I'm scrolling. I'm like, JD's is pregnant. Oh my God, congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
now with you being a mom, like what are some of the things that now you're going to instill? Like your mom, you had that moment with your mom where she actually apologized for this mindset that she instilled into you that you honestly was out of her control. It probably comes
Yeah,
from
of
her mom, right? So
course.
now how do we change this? How do we change this? And you're now becoming a mom. What are you going to tell your child about money? How are we now raising this child to understand this new developed mindset?
Ooh, I love this question. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot. I'm having a daughter, so I'm just like, wow,
Yes.
this is like
Congrats.
full circle moment. And I just want her to know that like anything is possible. And I want her to be able to look at me and have like a living example of what that looks like. She's not going to be one that has to opt out of the struggle. I know there's some times where I see weird conversations on the internet where it's like, well, I'm not going to help my child because I work so hard for this. And I'm just like, isn't that the fucking point? Like for them not to have to work so hard. So no, she will not have to struggle. She will have options. She will be able to decide if she wants to follow the traditional route of going to college and getting a degree, or if she wants to go and start her own business. She's just going to have the choice to create the life that she wants. And not because, hey, I need to support mommy and papi, or I need to make a lot of money because they're going to need me. I'm like, no, the best gift that I can give my child is a financially free mom, so that you can go and live your most fully expressed life. So that's what I'm going to be passing on.
I love this. And I just love the whole rollout. Like you look so beautiful. I'm like, oh my God. I was like genuinely happy for you.
Oh, thank you.
I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I can speak to you forever. But let's get into the rapid fire questions. These are going to go by fast. So
Okay.
tell me you're Latina without telling me you're Latina.
I love Zumba. I dance to all the Latin music.
Yes. What does it mean to you to be Latina?
Proud. I'm proud as hell.
Is what's your favorite Latin dish?
Mofongo, you already know.
Yes. What's one thing you need in the morning?
Peace and quiet, which I don't know how much of that I'm gonna get as a mom anymore. So I'm gonna have to pick something else.
Okay, if there's one financial literacy lesson you wish was taught to every young Latina, what would it be and why?
You cannot out earn bad spending habits. Okay.
Mm, love that. What is this chapter of your life called?
I'm doing me.
Love that. What is something you would want to work on that you haven't already?
I think one thing that's always fallen on the wayside is my physical health. I think it's very easy for hustlers to just get into the grind and put our physical health aside. And as I get older, I realize like health is wealth. And so I'm definitely putting way more focus on that, putting resources towards that because I want to be able to be the rich old auntie, not the rich young auntie who's got back pains and can't keep up.
Correct. If you had an opportunity to have the last supper with three Latinas, dead or alive,
Oh my
who would
God.
they be?
Definitely Selena. I have to
Yes.
meet J Lo and I have to meet Cardi B so I can tell them the cool story about why this podcast exists.
Yes. Okay, and finish this sentence. Growing up Latina is.
A privilege and an honor.
Yes. Thank you so much, Janice. It's honestly an honor for you to be on my podcast. Like I said, I've loved you for like ever now. Your podcast gives me life. It is what I listen to in the morning just so I can kickstart my day in the most positive way. So thank you. I also want to congratulate you. Just being a mom, I know you're going to be an amazing mom. Please let everybody know because I know you have a couple of courses, Master the Mind. I know you have a couple of things that people can tap into and also your book. Just let everybody know where they can find you.
Absolutely. So you can find my book wherever you buy books. The audiobook version is just like a 10-hour long version of my podcast. So you can get that at financiallylitbook.com or wherever you buy books. You can find the podcast wherever you're listening to this, Yo Quiero Dinero. And my website, yoquierodineropodcast.com, has everything about how we can work together. I have courses, one on one coaching, master classes, free events, all the things. And so if you wanted to get into a community of Latinas who are talking about building wealth, then Yo Quiero Dinero podcast is where it's at.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.